What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Full Draw Friday. This week, I'm talking about using trail cameras during the rut and whether or not it's the best time of year to implement trail cameras and to use them to determine your hunts. But before I get into all that, don't forget about our partners for Full Draw Friday. The first one is Rack's Big Game Supplements. You guys can go to racksmineral.com and check them out and see everything that they have to offer. And the other partner is Rodney Hawkins with MFL, Midwest Farm and Land, and RG Outdoors. You know, Midwest Farm and Land, if you guys are unfamiliar, is a real estate company, and they specialize in recreational properties. They do residential stuff also. But Rodney's an agent with them. He's a land specialist. So if you've got property in Illinois you're wanting sold, or if you're looking to buy some, you can get a hold of him at 618-925-3153. That's also the same number that you can talk to him about RG Outdoors at. He has all kinds of stuff for the outdoors at the store. He's got everything from patio furniture to trail cameras and tree stands, and he's got blinds and e-bikes and all kinds of stuff. He's adding new stuff all the time, so you can use that phone number to talk to him about any of that stuff as well. They're on Facebook too at RG Outdoors. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button and leave us a review if you would. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, like, comment, all that kind of stuff. Comment what you think is the best time of year to utilize trail cameras when we get to that point. Also, our website is ridgehunteroutdoors.com. Anything you find on there, like our scent that's going fast right now, you can use the discount code RHOPOD. That's all caps, no space, and you can get 10% off of everything in your order. All right, let's dive into this trail cameras during the rut. And the question I kind of pose is the rut the best time to utilize trail cameras? And I think it could very well be. I think mid-rut cameras especially can be really deadly, and that's kind of what phase we're going into now, second phase of the rut, middle of the rut. Between now and next week's episode, you'll probably see some lockdown depending on where you're at, especially farther north you go. Right around next week's episode, a few days after probably is when we'll start seeing heavy lockdown where we're at in Southern Illinois. But all the more reason to use these trail cameras, because even during the lockdown phase, I think they can be a super good tool for tracking down a buck and getting them on the ground. Talked about it before. You can kind of pattern bucks during the rut, but not very well. There's certain areas that they might use, but it's going to be very inconsistent depending on where the does are, because ultimately that's what he's looking for, so that's what you should be looking for. But your cameras can help with that. So I would say that the other time that maybe rivals the mid-rut for when cameras can be the most deadly is early season, because you can pattern those bucks in early season a lot of times, especially depending on where you're at, how early your season opens. You get those trail cameras out there, and if you're getting a buck that's showing up every day or every other day or two out of every 3 days in a certain spot, then it doesn't take a genius to figure out all you need is the right wind, and you can go in there and probably kill that buck. So early season for patterning deer, and you can make the argument that that's the best time to utilize trail cameras. They're also really good for inventory, of course, so in the off season or in the late season, finding out what's still around. But at those points, you're not really making your hunting decisions on them just yet, or like in the late season, you're not necessarily making hunting decisions on inventory. Just because you know what bucks you have left doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go in and hunt a spot. It might if they're daylight, and again, they're on some kind of pattern, because you will see that in the late season some as well, just like you will early season. Their bed-to-food pattern will become very, very predictable most of the time in the late season. However, I think, and in my experience, the middle of the rut, trail cameras have gotten me the most opportunities. So the most times I've had a chance at a buck because of a camera have been from, say, November 10th to November 20th, in that time range. And it's not, some of those times have been, I've got a picture of a buck in that area, and I've went in there and I've had an encounter with him or got a shot at him. But it's not always that. It's not always that you have to have a picture of that mature buck, because a lot of times, especially throughout the year, once you get a picture of that buck, you're already kind of one step behind him. During the rut, you're still kind of behind him, but it's likely if he's on a doe, he's going to still be in that area for a little while. So you have some room there to get the picture and then go hunt him. Whereas if you're talking like maybe October 20th or October 18th, you get the picture of him and you go hunt him, you're probably just a day late or a few hours late, whatever it is, whenever you got the picture. But it's not always that. It's not always the picture of the buck. A lot of times it is pictures of or lack of pictures of does, because you know if there's areas that you're not seeing does on your cameras, there's probably not going to be bucks there either. Also, if you see does that are without fawns, that's a good indication that those does are probably either in estrus or they're getting really close to being in estrus. So it's all about not necessarily buck activity, but the right type of activity. Like those hot does, like those fawns by themselves or does by themselves, or especially if you have like a bunch of little bucks just parading after a doe goes through, or if you have a bunch of little bucks in an area, maybe you had a group of does go through earlier, or one solo doe especially, and then you've got several pictures of little bucks but no big buck, there's probably a big one in the area. If you've got one around, he's probably found that doe. Those little ones are probably satellite bucks. We always talk during the rut, of course, about having to be where those deer are. So when you see that on your cameras, that's kind of what I'm talking about. That can really help you out. Again, pictures of does without fawns, pictures of lots of does. Even if you don't have bucks there, you know it's only a matter of time if you're getting pictures of a lot of does. Pictures of a buck behind a doe, obviously, you would think is a good time to get in there and get after him, because he's likely pushing her up into a place where he's going to, hold her for a while, especially if that's a shooter. He's pushing her into a thicket or something like that. Then he's probably going to be there for a day or two with that doe. And then really any buck behind a doe. If you see a 2-year-old or 3-year-old after a doe went through, whether he's right on her tail or he's a couple minutes later, and then again you see a bunch of activity from a lot of little bucks coming in front of that camera, then that's probably a good indication you need to get in there. All of that stuff is why I think that these cameras are best utilized during the rut, because for the whole rest of the year, I think you can rely on them way too much. And you can do it during the rut too, don't get me wrong, because there's so much that cameras miss. I mean, they only see so much. They only have so far of a range that they'll actually take a picture. Some deer will just walk right behind them. Some deer will walk in front of them and they won't take a picture of them. Sometimes on these cell cameras, it'll send you the picture 2 days later. We just had that happen to one recently. I was there. I saw the buck walk in front of the camera, and then we didn't get the picture for a day and a half, I think. And so if you're trying to make a decision based on that, that's not always the greatest information. But especially throughout the year, where I was talking about earlier, if you're talking early season, you get the picture of him, you're already a day late. Or maybe you're just not getting any pictures, so you never go into that spot. But in reality, he's been there 4 out of 6 days, and he's just not walked in front of the camera. Or even if you've got 10 cameras on 40 acres, there's still so much space that you can't cover with those cameras that buck could be moving in and out of a certain location. So I think we can rely too much on them for most of the year in those instances, and you allow it to keep you from hunting more so than if you get a picture of them and you go hunt them. I mean, that's kind of the idea of it. But that can also be a bad thing, like I said, because maybe you're a step behind him and you should have been somewhere else hunting him where you might have a picture of him that night. But during the rut, I think, especially mid-rut, you can really hunt based off of your cameras more than any other time of the year, based on what you are seeing and what you're not seeing. Because a lot of times, even if you don't get buck pictures, or even if you don't get a ton of pictures of deer, you're still at least getting those 1 or 2 does. Let's say you got a camera that's been pretty consistent all year. You've been getting a handful of does in front of it every other night, every night, whatever it is. And now, November 14th, 13th rolls around, and you're not getting anything on that camera at all. probably a good indication you don't need to go to that spot because something has changed. Maybe the bucks have come in there and scattered them, and they're on different pieces of the property or different properties altogether now. The same as if you've had a camera that you kind of set up thinking it could be good for November, that's been pretty quiet all year. Maybe you've had 1 or 2 deer every now and then, but now you're seeing like 3 and 4 does, or you're seeing solo does, you're seeing several little bucks. That's probably a good indication to go in there and get after it. That's how you can use those cameras during the rut to have success rather than let them keep you from having success like it happens so much throughout the year. So that's one of the biggest rut strategies, in my opinion. We all know about funnels and pinch points, and if you don't, there's plenty of information out there on those. We've talked about them here, sitting funnels and pinch points, good ones. You all know about water during the rut. I think that one does get overlooked quite a bit, but if you've got a good hidden water source, or especially water source in a thicket or right by one, that can be really good, especially midday during the rut. Even if it's cold, those deer have been chasing. They need to go get some water, so that can be really good. You guys probably know about that. You know about ridges and doe bedding areas and stuff like that. But I think paying attention to your trail cameras is just as deadly as any of those other strategies because it can tell you where you need to be more so than any other time of the year. I've had it happen so many times where, like I said, between that November 10th and November 20th, I've got a picture of a buck with a doe or that looked like he was cruising, and I know there's does in the area, and I've gone in there either, let's say I got the picture that morning, I've either gone in there that evening or I got the picture that evening or that night, and I've went in there the next morning, and I've seen that deer, I've had an encounter with that deer, either that hunt or the very next hunt. It just... Even going back to this year, just a couple weeks ago, or even a week ago, the 31st, Halloween, I got a picture that morning of a really good 8-pointer. And I went in because I knew in that place, that time of year, and I know this is a little earlier than that time frame I gave, but the activity was telling me it was a very similar situation. A doe went through, and he went through 2 minutes later, and you could tell he was on the exact same trail she was, and stuff was happening in there. And I knew, because of that property and my experience with it, that he would still be in there for at least another day or two. And so I went in that evening. I saw what I thought was every doe on the place, probably was, and I didn't see him. But I knew I did a hanging hunt because I was going to leave it that night and go back in the morning, and I knew that he would still be in that area at least until the next morning. And he might be trying to go back to where he came from after he got off that doe, or maybe he'd be in there still locked down with that doe, whatever the case. So I went back in the next morning. So this was November 1st. And sure enough, after 4 other bucks had come through with a doe, he was coming back through at 8:30. Next to last buck I saw, he was coming back through by himself at 8:30, headed the direction he came from the morning before. And of course, I messed it up. I tried to reach up and turn my camera on and get my bow, and for as still as it was either too much movement or I made some noise and he heard me or something, and he was about to step in the food plot, and he just was not comfortable enough with whatever he heard or saw to step out in the open, so he turned around and went right back in the brush. But the point is, I got that picture. It was October 31st, November 1st, and I knew that he was likely still going to be there, whereas had it been October 13th, it would have been like, well, I should have been in there that day, and now I probably won't see him again for a few days. There's no reason to really crash in there. I knew at the time of year it was and the property the way it was that it was time to go in, and I should have killed that deer. If I wasn't filming, I probably do kill that deer. So that's not to say that you will always be able to hunt off your trail cameras during the rut. Of course, there's going to be times where you see a ton of activity. You've seen this too. There's a ton of activity on camera all morning or all evening, and you go the very next hunt, whether that's the next evening or the next morning, and it is just dead because everything's pushed out of there. And then that evening, you have no pictures, and you'll see that sometimes. Maybe you can't hunt that evening, so you got a ton of activity on your camera that morning, and then that evening, you have absolutely nothing. If you don't have activity throughout the entire night, they're probably not going to be there in the morning either. If you have more activity somewhere else, I'd go hunt that other spot. Even though you had so much, you had some chasing going on, you had a bunch of deer by your camera the morning before, if there was nothing there that evening and you had another spot that was, you were seeing a little bit of activity, I'd go to that other spot. I think the cameras can be so deadly during this time of year. I think if you guys aren't utilizing them, you should be. If you're running card cameras, this is also the time of year where you can get away with checking them a little bit more because those bucks don't care as much about your intrusion because they've got one thing on their mind. So go out there and run those cards at least every, few days. And if you got the right weather, for sure, go do it as much as you can get away with it and figure out what's going on in the area. This right now is the best time to use these cameras to help you kill deer. I think if you guys implement that, if you pay as much attention to your cameras as possible right now for the next week and a half, it's going to really change the outcome of your hunts and even just change your hunts in general. You're going to have less slow hunts. You're going to see more deer. Even if you don't see a shooter buck, you're going to have more enjoyable sits. It's going to keep you out going for the next one. And then that turns into you being out there at the right time, in the right place, and finally getting a shot at your target buck or a nice buck, whatever you're after. That's all I got for this Full Draw Friday, guys. Hopefully that helps. I hope you guys can use that and you can put a deer on the ground. If you do, send us an email, ridgehunteroutdoors@gmail.com. Send us a message through the website or our social media, which is Ridge Hunter Outdoors. We'd appreciate a follow on Facebook and Instagram. But if you have success, let us know. Send us pictures. We'd love to see them, guys. That's all I got. And I will see you on Monday for a Deer Season Daily and a regular episode.